sew along. This is part 2. I was on yesterday sewing No Me ME2052. Yesterday was part 1. And I'm back today, part 2. We're going to see how much we can get done today. I'm not going to rush it. I'm going to be on for about 2 hours. And if we still have things that we need to do, I'm just going to make it a part 3. And then I'll hop on either tomorrow is Thursday, either tomorrow or Friday, but I'll let you know. So on yesterday, we actually worked on the placket. We did the placket together, showed you how I did that. We installed buttonholes. So I did those here, showed you how I do those. Constructed the pockets, and the matching I think is really nice. So you can barely see the pockets there. I also added these pockets kind of like around the waist, again, hidden. I really like the way that that turned out. And then here with the yoke, I showed you guys how I like to construct a yoke on not only this make, but any men's shirt, women's shirt, jacket, or coat. And you can go ahead and do the yoke this way. I do it, it's called a burrito method. And so you'll find that in the part 1 that was uploaded on yesterday. If you have any questions about that, just feel free to reach out to me or drop comments on yesterday's live or on this one today. But that's a really neat way to do the yoke and have all beautiful clean lines. And then I top stitched it. After I did that, we started work on the collar. We constructed the collar, and I showed you how I use my point turner so that I have nice, clear, crisp corners, nice pointy corners. I want to tell you what you'll need before I get started with today's sew along. I'm going to use regular pins, grab clips if you like clips, grab whatever you like to use to cut thread or fabric. My iron is turned on. I think that's pretty much it that you need to get started. So let's go ahead and dive in and see how far we can get. So where we are picking up today is on the instruction piece 19. So actually I did this on yesterday where for the collar band, which I actually call the stand, you had to press under onto the wrong side of the garment, roughly about 3/8 of an inch. It says 5/8. I made mine a little bit more narrow. And then what we do now is we are going to pin that to the collar. So there's the collar, there's the collar stand, and we have those pinned together. And I'm just going to go ahead, and it does say right sides facing, and the seam allowance for this particular pattern, actually for all of the commercial patterns, is 5/8 of an inch, but I always recommend that you check the seam allowance first. So it's 5/8 of an inch. I've actually just used, let me adjust it so you can see the sewing machine. I like to use just painter's tape, just a bead of that, because that helps me to manage the seam allowance and keep everything the way that it should be. Nikki! So guys, the pattern designer is actually on with us, Boat Jador, and she is the pattern designer for this particular pattern. So Nikki also does, in addition to Know Me commercial pattern, she has her entire line of independent patterns. So you definitely want to make sure that you are following her. Good morning, Tata. So let's get started. We are at the collar, and I'm going to right sides facing. I'm going to sew the collar to, they call it a collar band, I call it a collar stand, and using the 5/8 seam allowance. I am using my my Pfaff Quilt Ambition 630. That is my workhorse. If I need to serge, and the fabric doesn't really fray much, but if I need to serge, then I'm going to use my Bernina L860 serger. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Again, we'll do as much as we can in about 2 hours today. If there are pieces that are still left to be sewn, I'm not going to rush through it. We're going to come back later this week and finish up those particular sections of the project. I'm one of those sewists that I actually like to kind of savor the project. And this fabric is a Burberry fabric that I got from Nikki online. And I like to savor that. I don't want to like rush through it and go from project to project. So, you know, that's the other reason why I break it down and make it manageable, because y'all, we got lives that we lead, right? And we can't get it all done. Hello, Lisa. We can't always get it done in one seating, and that's a-okay. All right, so make sure that you snip any loose threads as you go along. I really like this spring action little thread clipper. It's very sharp and incredibly lightweight and handy. Okay, so now that I've done that, it says turn right side out and press. I'm gonna head over to my iron. I think you guys can still see me from here. I'd already turned this on before I got started. How's everyone doing today? I appreciate you guys dropping in and spending a little bit of time with me. And the iron that I'm using is an Oliso. I like the Oliso iron. I like the fact that when I lift the iron, it immediately, the feet retract. And when I place it down, the feet extend the iron off of the surface. And I like that. So I don't have to give it a whole lot of thought. Like if I leave the iron face down, nothing is going to burn. Okay, so I gave that a little bit of a press. This is kind of a wool type fabric, and it holds heat. It tolerates heat pretty well, but I have my clapper over there. So if I don't want to use a lot of heat, then I'll press it, but then I'll place the clapper on top so that the heat kind of radiates between the wood. And no scorching, and it's just really great for your fabric. Okay, so we press that. All right, we're on number 21. We turned it right side out. We pressed it. We're going to pin the collar band to the neck edge. All right, so let me grab my fabric. The neck edge, remember, this is something that we did last time, is that we stay stitch the neck edge, and that's an important piece. When you stay stitch, it is the opposite of basting. So with basting, you lengthen the length of your stitch. So usually it's about a 5 on your sewing machine. When you are stay stitching, you do the opposite, and so you go lower, shorter stitches, and that basically prevents your fabric from distorting and stretching when you add a collar. It's especially helpful with collars or like V-necks or anything like that, mostly around the collar area. So I'm glad you dropped in, Lisa. So I'm hoping that I will be able to help you get through this. I haven't gotten to the part where I'm sandwiching the collar between the two collar bands. So let's do that part together. And I haven't, I made this one other time, but it's been a little while. So I'm going to, let's see where we are, and we'll work on it together. You're welcome. I'm happy. And I hope you have your piece with you too, so we can, truly sew this piece together. All right. So I'm at step 22 if you are as well, Lisa. And it says to pin the collar band to the neck edge. So pin the collar band to the neck edge, clipping the garment neck edge where necessary, and then stitch. So what gets me is it looks like it has oh, did it have me stitch the collar band pieces together? Because I think I was supposed to. Oh, you know what? Pin under interface side of collar. Reading is fundamental, guys. Pin uninterface side of collar to interface collar band between large circles. Pin the collar band over the collar. So, guys, I totally skipped this part. Over the collar and base, stitch leaving the neck edge open. Okay, so this part doesn't exactly, I have to think about it for a minute on what I am doing. So it would be sandwiching in the collar, and that part doesn't make sense to me, the way that this is coming together. So let me think about the construction and the way that it would come together. It does indeed have it sandwiched in between, but I'm just thinking that once I do that sandwich piece, so I like to pin it sometimes and then open it up as if it was actually sewn together. So that's one of my little tricks. I'll do that even before I baste. And then that does not look right to me. It says it's done that way, but I tell you, that does not look right to me. Oh, I know why. Okay. Got it, got it, got it, got it, got it. And I love you guys watching my process, because a lot of times when you see the makes that we post on social media, we look amazing, but you don't necessarily know how many times we had to pull out a seam ripper. Now this is beginning to make more sense. All right, so Lisa, what I did was I sandwiched the collar between the two pieces of the collar band, and making sure that you line up your notches. Yep. So it took me a moment to figure that out. But what I was saying is that I think it's important for other people to see the process and understand that sometimes, you have to, um, you know, correct things as you go along. And it's okay. It is absolutely okay. So there's a lot of fabric here. Make sure that you're lining up your notches. And okay. So this makes a lot more sense. So when it comes down, that's going to be the collar band, or the collar stand, or whatever terminology you want to use. Okay, let me go ahead and sew that. Again, it doesn't tell us to do it at any different seam allowance. So continue with your 5/8 seam allowance. Remember, it just wants you to baste it. So let me go ahead and lengthen the stitch to 5. Just want you to initially baste and then stitch. I'm just going to go over the line that I had there before, removing my pins and clips as I go along. So Nikki, I don't know if you were on when I was sharing with folks that I'm actually making my ME2052 into more of a shacket. So I'm using a heavier weight. And I did, my pockets a little bit differently. Okay, so that looks really good. And then I will take it over to press it. But I am going to now bring my stitch back down to the regular length, and I'm going to go right over, making sure to back stitch just a little bit. Back stitch and go over that basting stitch. Y'all, I really am loving this fabric. I already know that I am going to wear this with Marcia's, those pants with the crossover flap, my leather pants. All right, so now I'm going to iron that. So when I iron, I always like to iron over the actual seam so that the thread has a chance to kind of meld, so to speak, into the fabric. Now I'm going to press both sides open. I am going to probably use my clapper, making sure that the edges are nice, because I want to reduce any extra fabric, you know, reduce the bulk in the seams effectively. Turn it over, press it on the other side. Y'all, this is looking so good. This is looking, let me hit that again. This is looking really good. Oopsies. And now I remember when I did this shirt the first time, I actually pulled together my collars just a little bit differently. This pattern has you doing a lot of slip stitching, and I'm not doing all that slip stitching. So these are duckbill scissors. I really love these. They're inexpensive. I actually got these from Wawak. Actually, Wawak was kind enough to gift me. So I am going to kind of layer my seam so that I can reduce the bulk in the seam area. So Tata, let me know if you are, yeah, wine makes everything better. I love that. So Tata, did you get the, Lisa, did you get this part? Thank you so much, Nikki. I love it too. All right, so guys, I am going to go in and I'm going to take a little bit off of the center piece of fabric there, which happens to be the most bulky piece, because at this particular point, I have 4 pieces of fabric coming together in that one seam. And that's a lot. It wouldn't be as big of a deal if I was sewing with just basic cotton, but this is more like a wool. And I have a little bit of this fabric left, guys. I'm going to have to make a purse. My daughter was like, y'all, this is crazy. This is crazy and so random. My daughter was like, Mom, you need, I'm not even going to say it. It was crazy, but she was telling me who I needed to send this to after I finished making it. But and it's a superstar, but I'm not doing it. Okay, so what I did was I used my duckbill scissors, and I just went in and I cut one seam a little bit lower than the others, and that helped to reduce the bulk in that seam. So I like that. It helps my fabric to lay a lot flatter. Okay, so we did that part. I almost messed up on that, and then I would have had to go back in and correct it, which wouldn't have been the end of the world, right? All right, so now I'm at the part that I want to pin the collar band to the neck edge. They want me to clip the neck edge where necessary, stitch, keeping pressed edge free, trim, press seam toward collar band. Okay. And it does look like it is the right side of the fabric, because you want the nice seam to be there. And you may have noticed that I put a little sticky on my fabric. It's just to let me know which side of the collar that I want to be on the outside instead of the underside. And I had the one that kind of matches up with the rest of the pattern. So I wanted to make sure that that is on the outside. Okay, so, and does this go all the way edge to edge? It does, I believe. This is where you want to, I don't think it does, actually. I think it goes a little bit beyond. I'm going to first match up my notches and then go from there. So let's, I like to also work with the center seam. And the notches here, what happened to my notches, guys? I don't even see my notches over there right now. Yikes. What happened to my notches? So I would rate this pattern, because some people will ask that question. Is this pattern something that a beginner can do? I think it is something that I would say is more of a, at a minimum, an advanced beginner pattern, and likely really more of an advanced beginner. Sorry, more, it's an advanced beginner. What am I saying? I'm trying to pen and talk at the same time. I would say it is at a minimum an advanced beginner pattern, but I would say it's intermediate at least, because you have the buttonholes you need to do, the whole burrito. If you do that with the install of the yoke, I think with the construction of the collar, all of this. I mean, it is doable, but it's, it's helpful. The sew-alongs I think are helpful, and I must say Nikki sew-along I thought was really, really good. And so when you get to some of the tough parts, you always can drop into one of the sew-alongs. Actually, that's one of the things that I really love about the Nomi brand, and also just the changes that have come to Simplicity, with big thanks to Mimi G, because you find finished garment measurements on every pattern envelope. And not only do you have finished garment measurements, there are sew-alongs. And y'all, all of that is amazing. All right, so I have it. I have the collar stand now pinned to the right side of the shirt. I'm going to take it now to the sewing machine. I've used clips, and I'm going to go ahead and stitch all the way down, making sure that I keep, it looks like my stand was sewn in already, and that, did they sew all the way around the stand? I keep seeing the curved edge sewn. It is. That curved edge is sewn, but let me think about whether I want to be bought. Nope, I don't need to do it now. I can leave it like that. Clean it up. Yeah, I think I'm fine. I can do it like that, clean it up. I'm just thinking through the construction process. I don't always necessarily follow the instructions that are provided. I've made, I'm not going to say a lot of shirts. I am not, by any stretch of the imagination, a professional at any of this. I have only been sewing for about 3 years, and I sew everything now from my bathing suits, which I need to perfect. They are good. They're not perfect yet. I'm still working on that process, mostly for the fit, because of my curvaceousness. So it's mostly for the fit. And then I sew dresses. I love to make dresses. I love to make dresses because when I make a dress, I have an entire outfit. All I need to do is put on some earrings and some shoes, and I am good to go. I make a lot of bomber jackets. I love a bomber jacket. So I do a lot of bomber jackets. And I do a fair amount of coats. So sometimes I have to force myself not to do a coat, because I will do a coat, and yo, I got a lot of coats. It's like, come on, Byrd, how many you need? This particular shacket I'm making, I think, will be perfect as we transition away from winter to spring. And it's coming, guys. I'm holding the groundhog to his word. He said spring was coming, so in 6 weeks. And Groundhog Day was a minute ago. So I'm like, come on, dude, come on. I'm holding you to it. But this will be a great transitional piece for winter going into spring. Okay, back stitch. I'm going to now take that over to the ironing board because I want to press that seam up. And then once I press it up, well, first off, I'm going to go ahead and close this piece here. So let me go ahead and do that because that's important. Really should have done it before, but your girl is going to do things her own way. Okay, making sure my collar is out of the way. Okay, it's coming together. I'm going to do that on the other side. And keeping that little fold there. All right, moving anything extra out of the way. Back stitch it. I'm going to measure those two pieces, make sure that they are lining up nicely. I'm going to go in a little bit closer on this one. It's a subtle little adjustment, and you may not notice it, but I will, and so I want to make sure it's as even as possible. This is also a great wet place if you want to kind of reduce the seams. I am going to actually cut around that little curve in the collar stand, but before doing that, I want to make sure that they are nicely rounded. And so you can see that I'm going in a couple times until I feel like I'm happy with it. Again, these are things that you may not notice, but I will notice. Okay, I'm happier with that. This is a little bit further out, but I think when I push out, it's a little bit further out than I want it to be than the other. It is not a perfect union. I can come in a little bit closer here. Let me do that. Keeping the collar out of the way. All right. Let me take a peek. Make sure I didn't overdo it. Yeah, one is definitely a little bit further out than the other, and I'm going to unpick a little bit because it's not going to line up exactly as nicely as I would like it to. You're not going to notice it, but I'm going to try to get it as close to perfect as possible. But at the end of the day, y'all heard me yesterday, I do not let perfect get in the way of pretty darn good. Because if that was the case, I would never finish any of my makes. That's just the reality of it. So, and I don't know if you guys ever noticed that on some of the seam rippers. Let me see if I have mine handy. On some of the seam rippers, like the end. Hello, Karen. Oh, thank you so much, Sparker Parker. I love that. Thank you, Lisa. Did you ever notice that on the end of the seam ripper, some of them, they had this little rubber nub? That little rubber nub is handy because you rub it over where you just seam ripped, and it helps to get up those little pieces of thread. It's like a little eraser. Okay. All right, guys, it is not as perfect as I would like it to be. It's a little bit off center. And let me see. Will you notice that? Nope, you won't notice it. All right, so I'm happy with that. I am now, before I take it over to the sewing machine to press it, I'm going to go in and clean up the seams, especially in those corners. Where's my other pair of scissors? I need the sharp, sharp, sharp scissors for this one. Where are you now, Lisa, with yours? Okay, making sure I'm cutting the right place. You want to get in there close to that stitch so that you have a nice clean edge on your collar. All right, cut a little bit more of that. Let's do that down on this end as well. Again, be careful when you're doing this that you do not cut through any of your stitching. Okay. Now I'm going to take it, oh, before I go over there to press it, this is a point turner and it has two edges to it. So this is really great for when you're getting into these little corners of your collar. This is really great when you're getting into this area of your stand. And I love it. You can just press and press your point turner in there. These are inexpensive. I do have an Amazon store, and all of my sewing things, I like to call them my sewing tings, but all of those things are in my Amazon store. Let me give it a little bit of push in there. Try to push that out a little bit more. Whoops, don't want to do that, Byrd. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead. Yeah, so the collar is now just going to go over. I'm going to press this part up. It's going to go over. Let me press it up. And they tell you to slip stitch this. I'm not going to slip stitch it. I'm going to actually stitch in the ditch. It's okay. Go ahead and unpick it. You want to go ahead and take your time with it. Don't rush through it. Lisa, I will, after we finish today's live, I'm going to put it up on YouTube. I'll go ahead and I'm not even going to edit it. What you get is what you get. I want all of my stuff to be real, guys. You're not going to get this professional, cleaned up person. You're going to get me. So once we are done today, I am going to go ahead and put this live up with the links where you can get the pattern. I'll link Nikki there too, so you can go ahead and follow Nikki. But take your time, and then you can always come back and kind of follow along. All right. All right, so I am liking the way that looks. Let me see if it needs any extra pressing on the outside. And get rid of any extra things. That was one of the hardest parts of the jacket, and we got through it in roughly, I think it was about 25 minutes. So it's doable. And of course, you know, if I were repeating it now, it would come together a lot easier, a lot faster. But that's the beauty of trying to do things and try to hit it again. Okay. Looking good. What I am now going to do, guys, is I am going to, I love to use pins a lot, but on this particular step where I'm going to stitch in the dip, it tells you to slip stitch it. I try to avoid all that hand stitching. If I have to do hand stitching, I will do hand stitching, but if there is an alternative that's going to give me still a very clean finish, then that's what I'm going to do. So I'm just pressing the collar band or the stand down on the inside to make sure that I'm covering up the raw edges and trying to line it up there. And then I'm going to, while I'm holding it down with one hand, I'm going to, from the outside, use a pin along the seam, and I'm going to stitch right in the ditch. So I'm going to do that all the way around. If I find that there's any pulling, because a pattern does tell you that you can clip a little bit if you need to, little snips to create a little bit more you know, a little bit more flexibility in certain things. Right now, I don't find that I need it, so I'm not going to worry about that. But I'm just going to take my time doing this all the way around. It doesn't take very long, actually. You do want to make sure, feeling it with your finger, that that inside folded edge does indeed cover the seam, so that when you stitch in the ditch, it does indeed pull it in. Oh man, there was one thing I had wanted to do that I forgot. So there was one little tiny piece that I wanted to add, which was a little label, and now I'm searching for it. Do you ever lose things on your table? Because I do. I'm like, it was just there. All right, where did the label go? It was a really cute little label, a little leather label. And let me see, I was cleaning up my labels today. No, my organization is not perfect, but these little Ziploc bags keep stuff together. But what did I do with that label? I tell you guys, I will lose something on my sewing table in a heartbeat. It was a cute little leather label. I was saving it for this. And then no, Byrd, you lose it. I'm checking. All right. I think I'm going to have to move on without her. It was cute. It said Mini Boss. Juno Designs. Uh-oh. Did I find one? No, this one says Be Kind, but that's okay. That's a nice vibe, too. I really wanted Mini Boss because that one really spoke to me. But I could do Be Kind. What I was planning to do is put that right here at the center of my stand. So if I'm going to do that, this will be the time that I would need to do it. I want to make sure that I'm at the center. Grab my little measuring tape because my marks are all hidden at this point. So that will be at right about 4 inches. So right about here. Y'all, where did that other little tag go? Is it under my sewing machine? Nope. There is an adhesive part behind this, but I don't use it because if you put any serious heat on this leather label, it's going to burn. So I don't do it. All right. I like that. Sometimes it's the smallest little details that I go for. Okay. So I'm going to get it lined up and just simply stitch my label in. Oopsies. Okay. Are there particular labels that you guys love? Some people don't put labels in their garments at all. I forgot to change the color of my thread. Y'all didn't tell me change the color of my thread. It's okay though. But do you guys use labels? It's the small things in life that can make a big difference. Yep. Tie it off. Yes, I could have used a matching thread, but I'd already started sewing and it's leather and I didn't want to perforate, have all these extra holes in it. So I like that. I like it. All right, let me get back to pinning down the collar. Have you caught back up with me yet? Julian, hey baby, how are you? Julian, I'm making really good progress on the shirt, which I'm making into more like a shacket. So I'm using this really beautiful Burberry fabric. I've always wanted a Burberry, um, anything Burberry, right? And, you know, every time we are in one of the stores, I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh, look at the price though. So I was excited about making something with this type of fabric, and I have a little bit of it left. So I want to make a purse of some sort. Check in with the bag girlies and see what they would recommend. And it's a woven. It's like a flannel or a wool type. I have to go back to um, just in Nick of Time fabrics to remember, but I think it's like a flannel. It might be wool, might be a flannel. But I want to make sure I stick that end in nice and neatly. But I want to check in with them, get some recommendations on a bag. Because I think I want to use every little bit of this fabric. All right, so again, this is the part of the instructions where the recommendation is, oh good, thank you so much, Julian. I definitely appreciate you stopping in and hanging out and watching. So this is where the instructions have you actually slip stitching, basically hand sewing this to the garment. I'm pretty sure that that's what it says to do. Notice how I just went completely away from the garment. No, it actually, does it tell you to do that? Press over, stitch close to the finished seam. Nope, it doesn't. You would actually have you stitching close. My bad. So when I put a, begin to sew a collar stand, there's a couple ways that you can do this. I actually like to start from the middle of the garment, and I'm getting close to the ditch as I can. And so I will sew from the middle to one end. I'll come back and I'll sew from the middle to the other end. Thank you so much, Lisa. Good. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Please tag me. I want to see your version as well. Please tag me and thank you. And I'm glad that I was able to be of help. So I'm taking my time to stitch in the ditch, and I can kind of feel with my finger to make sure that that folded edge is really under there and I'm catching it. This thread matches so neatly with this fabric that honestly, if I didn't stitch in the ditch, you wouldn't necessarily see it. It is such a great match. Again, I'm feeling that folded edge as I kind of go along to make sure that as I'm stitching in the ditch that I'm catching it in. Even around these little curved edges, because that's the part sometimes that I lose it. Okay, looking good. So really a lot of the more challenging parts of this particular pattern we've already conquered. And what is up next after this is we are going to begin work on the sleeve construction. There is the slit down here and then the construction of the cuff and that sort of thing. Because I am working with a heavier fabric, this pattern has a really amazing design that I love, and it has a double cuff feature. I'm going to show that to you here if I can get up close. Do you see Nikki modeling, and you see it's hard to tell, but it's a double cuff. It is really hard to see, and I love that feature. I did that when I made this using cotton sateen, but because I'm using a heavier fabric, I actually played with it a little bit on yesterday after I got off of the live, and using the heavier fabric and doing the double cuff, I found it to be a little bit too bulky. So I'm going to go with just a single cuff here. Okay, want to back stitch here. And let me see if they do any top stitching on the collar, because that's something that you normally do. There's no top stitching on the collar. I'm going to take a look and decide if I want to top stitch. Oh, that is beautiful, guys. This is beautiful. I completely caught in that edge. I have to do the other side. Look at how neat that looks. Look at how beautiful that looks. So I'm going to now go ahead, and this side will be a little bit more difficult because I have a lot more bulk of fabric on this side. But that's the way that I like to do it, from the center and then making my way out. All right, let's make sure that I'm starting where I ended, right about here. Okay. Gonna put my needle down into the ditch. Make sure I don't have any of the fabric getting in the way. Little tiny, tiny back stitch. Tiny, ever so tiny. Let me get rid of this extra piece of thread here. I love these. I cannot tell you how much I love them. Checking again with my finger to make sure that the fabric, I will be able to catch it and I can feel that folded edge underneath. It still feels really good from this position. Gonna go all the way around. Yep, all the way around. Again, this side I have a little bit more fabric to contend with, so I'm just taking my time to move it out of the way. All right, let's get in here close, back stitch this. Okay, and let's go ahead and pull my fabric out and take a peek. Clean up any of the loose threads. It's looking good, y'all. I'm loving the way that it's coming together. I don't know why sometimes on the inside I get these extra little thread bubbles, but normally if it was just on the inside of a garment, I wouldn't even worry about it too much, but I really want this to look really great on the inside. And I did a great job. I was able to catch it in all the way across, and so I don't need to go back and do any cleanup work. Thank you so much, Parker. Okay. Yay, the collar is collared. All right. We are now on the sleeves and the cuffs. I'm going to sit my jacket off to the side. Reach for the cuff. I mean the collar, the sleeve, and then this is when you also need to get what is called the continuous lap. And you need pattern piece number 7. You cut 2 of these in a mirrored fashion. And you want to make sure that you have transferred your notches. This is really important with the sleeve. The double notch, as a general rule, means that it's the back of the sleeve, and a single notch on a sleeve means it's the front of the sleeve. Those are very important markings that you want to transfer over. Okay, the first thing that the pattern has us doing is, so we had to transfer this little triangle marking there. They want us to reinforce that. So the way that I'm going to reinforce it is basically with what I call a stay stitch. So I'm going to reduce the width of my stitch, and I am just going to sew over the lines there. Getting down to the point, get to the point, drop the needle in, turn it all the way around, follow my markings on the outside, take it all the way to the end. And I don't really need to back stitch here because the stitch is so thin anyway. Then they have me cutting. Let's get rid of any extra little pieces of thread. Okay. Now I am going to carefully cut down the center of that triangle. Let me do it so I can see the actual stitches. Just all the way down the center, using a sharp tool. And you want to get as close to that little piece in the center where you dropped your needle and turn, because this is where we're going to put the continuous lap. All right, so the next thing that the instructions have us doing is you take the continuous lap and they have you press just a scant piece, kind of like, it doesn't really say, I think it's a quarter inch of your fabric to the wrong side of your fabric. And then it says pin the right side of your lap to the wrong side of your sleeve. So the wrong side of the sleeve, and you want to make sure that you're pinning the side of the continuous lap that you did not fold under. And I'm going to, it says, so pin the right side. So I have the right side. I'm going to go ahead and pin that down. This part can feel a little bit tricky when you're doing a continuous lap. So when you're working on that slit, what I find is that it is really, truly important that you have gotten up into that little area. Even the tiniest little bit will help that to kind of lay flat. I've already done this on the other side, and this is what it will look like when we are done. I already know that if I were to make a change to this, what I would have done is used a different piece of fabric, because I find that the fleece or the wool here, it's thicker than I really want it to be. So I would have used a thinner piece of fabric, maybe a very light tan color to match this. You're not going to really see it because it's under here anyway. But there's a little bit of bulk there that cutting, layering the seams doesn't address, I should say, not adjust. It doesn't address. So when you're doing that lap, it can feel weird kind of sewing it around. I like to kind of stretch it out kind of in a line. Go ahead and get to the other end, pin it on the other end. Hi, Victoria. Thank you for dropping in. Definitely appreciate it. We are sewing up No Me pattern 2052, and I am on the sleeve part. Okay, so then when we get to this center piece, this is where you definitely want to make sure that you are using pins. And you're going to sew that straight. And for me, I don't know if it tells you to do it that way. Yes, it does. That is the easiest way. And you want to go right over, for the most part, the stitches that you had there before. So right about 1/4 of an inch back stitch. Okay. Take your time when you get to that little V part and straighten out your garment. It may feel weird. Again, this is where I really wish that I had used a cotton basically here. But it is what it is. That's what I used. We're going with it. It's okay. It's just a minor adjustment that I would make. So that's one of my recommendations if you're using a heavier fabric. Okay. That is done. And because I know I'm going to run into a little issue here because we're dealing with very thick fabric. I am going to go ahead and trim the seam a little bit, being very careful because there's not a whole lot of seam there, but this is a lot of bulk up in that area. So I'm just going to carefully trim down a little bit. You don't really need to do this at all with cotton. And I'm only doing it really in that V area because it's chunky. I'm going to now take it over to the ironing board. I'm going to press that seam toward the lap. So let me do that. Forgive my back, guys, when I get up to head over to my ironing board. I'm going to eventually create myself one of those little ironing pads that I can just kind of put on my lap. Also want to do one for my, a new really pretty cover for my ironing board. But when I get to those kind of projects, I say to myself, okay, Byrd, do you want to do this or do you want to make a dress? And I'm like, oh, I think I want to make a dress. So I don't get to do it. All right. So I've pressed the seam toward the lap. I'm now going to fold over the lap to the right side of the garment, encasing the seam that the stitch that was there. And I'm going to go ahead and put a couple clips down. You can use pins or clips, whatever works for you. And all the way down that lap. All the way. And then I'm going to take it to the machine and I'm going to top stitch that down. Make sure that you take your stitch back to your regular length. Okay, straighten it out. Take my time getting into that bulky little area there. And all the way around. All right. Looks pretty good. So that is your slit basically. And this is the example of why I would have gone for a regular cotton here, whether it was black. I wouldn't have done black. I would have done maybe this beautiful taupe color. But what they have me do now is, I want to make sure that I'm doing this one the right way, is they have me, it says in the instructions to, oh, we're on a new instruction page. So at this particular point, it has you to turn the front edge of the continuous lap, that's what we just sewed, to the inside is shown, based across the lower edge. To keep the lap in place, stitch diagonally along the upper edge of the lap. Okay, so what I need to do on the outside of the garment is I'm going to lay one lap over top of the other. I'm going to show it to you. I'm going to pin it down first. This is a lot of fabric here. Let me think about the number of layers. So you have 1, 2, 3, it's like 6, maybe 7 pieces of fabric in this little area. Absolutely, I recommend using a cotton here. Okay, so I pin the lap down and I'm gonna just stitch across at the top, and basically it says to do it on a diagonal. Basically what that does, and there's a diagonal start from the edge and then down. Okay, basically what that does is it holds the lap in place and it lines up neatly with your cuff. So let me turn my pen around. This is in the way. Way too much fabric here for me. to my liking. Yep, way too much. But once I commit, I commit. Okay, there we go. And I'm gonna sew kind of on a diagonal. I'm gonna hit this really nicely with my iron too to try to get those layers to sit a little bit more. My machine is like, girl, okay. My machine is like, we don't want to go through all of these layers. Let's see if I can walk her through. That's the other thing that I recommend is if you are working with heavy pieces of fabric like this, and your machine is saying, no way, no how, we are not doing this, you can walk the machine through or slow down the speed of the machine. And by doing those things, I was able to make it work. Otherwise, my machine may overheat, and we don't want that to happen. All right, so the lap is down. All right, I am going to take them both to the iron and give it a little bit of a press. A little bit of steam here, and I'm going to apply a little pressure with my clapper because it's a little bit thick. And y'all, that makes a huge difference. I wish I had a before and after, but it made a huge difference in how that lays, and I'm very happy with that. So on the inside now of your garment, we are going to make those on the bottom part of your sleeve. We're going to make those pleats. So what it has you doing is there are solid and dotted lines that were transferred from the pattern piece. And the little arrow was there too, so I went on and used it. So you want to bring together right sides facing the dotted line and the straight line. And then you're going to, which way does the arrow go? And then you're going to fold it over in the direction of the dotted line. So I like to line those up first. Make sure those are lined up. And this matters because when it's time to install your the actual cuff, your cuff may actually be too short if you or too long. All right, so it says, I want to make sure I'm doing it right. Okay, I did crease here and bring that over to the dotted line and then fold it that way. Making sure that I'm lining up those lines. And I'm thinking of, did I do this in the wrong direction? I think I did my other one in the wrong direction, so I may have to take that one out because you bring the creases to the broken lines. And that's what I just did. So I'm now going to baste that. Making sure that it's nice and flat. All the way across. And on the other sleeve that I went on and did prior to coming on live so that I could save some time that we are here together, I'm going to double check to make sure that I indeed crossed it over the way that it needed to be. I think I did it the wrong way. So perfect. I'm going to just take out my seam ripper, and fortunately they were just basting stitches, so that's pretty easy to pull apart. With your seam rippers, they actually do dull over time. And I would say probably about once a year, I just throw mine away and I get a couple new ones, maybe 3 or 4, and I have them in different places in my sewing room, so they're always available for me when I need them. But they dull, and I mean, I guess you could sharpen them, but let me make sure I'm doing it the right way. I guess you could sharpen them, but they're so inexpensive. I would just recommend you go ahead and get yourself some new ones. Okay, I'm just making sure I'm doing this one the right way. So this one, why do I keep doing that? No, because no, my arrows I think are either. Let me double check my pattern piece. When in doubt, double check. Oh, I know why. Because guys, oh, what happened? I had this marking on wrong. When in doubt, double check. Did I do it right yet? Because it just seems like I'm just doing it backwards each time. So it goes, the pleats go. Actually, it looks like it goes away from the sleeve. All right, let's hope I did it right. And I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I am basting that stitch down, because if I didn't do it right, it won't be the end of the world to unstitch an inch there. Okay. We are done with that. I have pleats at the bottom of the cuff. And hi, Janine. Thank you for dropping in. I am now going to, I believe that the instructions have me working with, oh, before I do the cuff, it has me doing a lay flat to install the collar. So, and then I'm going to top stitch the collar. It says on, okay, all right. So let me make some space here so you can follow along as I'm doing this piece. This is one of the easiest ways to install a sleeve, is when you're laying it flat. Let me adjust you down so that you can see that. I'm going to push my serger out of the way just a little bit. Okay, so I have my fabric, may not be completely clear here, but I have my fabric and I have it, oops, got a little piece of thread. I have my fabric and it's right sides facing up. I'm going to grab a sleeve. First, I'm going to make sure that it's the right sleeve with the double notches in, so I can line up the notches. Good, perfect. So I'm going to place a sleeve on top of the garment, open it up. I'm going to try to do this as easy as I can. And you really want to make sure that those notches, that you're paying attention to the notches. Remember, the single notches are going to be the front of your sleeve and the double notches are going to be the back of the sleeve. So there's the front of the garment, and there is the notch for the front of the garment. So I like to start from the edges. I'm going to use clips. I'm going to go all the way to the other edge of the armhole, and I'm going to clip there. I go in and I'm going to first start by lining up my notches, which I'm going to start by lining up my notches. And I'm going to continue to go around on this side using clips. Let's go back and line up the notch on the other side. Double notches, because this is the back of the sleeve, which will line up with the back of the garment. And then you can just continue to make your way in. You do have a couple other notches that are on the garment. This is going to be, I believe, lining up at the center here. And then the other notch that's lining up on the where the yokes are located. But let's just go ahead and pin all the way around. Clip all the way around, making sure that you're not distorting your fabric, stretching either layer. And remember before what we had done was, seems a little bit big to me. So this is where I go back in and I make adjustments, because sometimes I can find that I was going a little bit crazy around some of the curves. Oops. Making sure that your garment is not falling off the table. And I find that a little bit odd that it's, let me double check my measurements, guys. Okay, so this side looks good. Sometimes I can get a little bit handy instead of taking my time, because you are pinning around a curve. You do want to make sure that you're using more clips, and that usually addresses any gap that I may have in my pattern pieces. If I don't take my time around the curves here, I may find that one piece is shorter than the other. And then I just remind myself, go back, girl, go back, Byrd, especially through the curved pieces, and take your time pinning it in. And it's still just a little bit off to me, so I'm not really, I want to make sure. So I'm going to go back in here again. That's a little bit odd, and I did make sure I did cut the right size shoulder. I believe I did. I don't think I shortened anything that would lead me to believe that. Does it tell me to ease the sleeve in? Let me go back, because sometimes that happens too. Nope, it doesn't really have me easing the sleeve in. So there's something wrong either with my measurements or my pinning, or whatever the case might be. So we're going to work it out. We are going to work it out. It's still a tiny bit off, and be patient. Be patient. Get all the way in there. Hi, SD Wraps. All righty, y'all. Sometimes you just have to trust the process. So you guys saw that here, where I kind of did it very quickly and it wasn't lining up. And then I went back and I added more clips and made sure that I was clipping every little piece, and it lined up from one end to the other. So I'm going to go ahead and take it to the sewing machine, regular stitch. And let's go ahead and start from one end. All the way, double back stitch here. While I'm sewing up the sleeve to the garment, I wanted to share with you guys, if you're not on Instagram, there are actually two different competitions going on, where I know at least for one of the competitions you can win. Don't quote me, I think it is money. On one of the other competitions, I forget what it is, but one of the competitions is by Black Sewing Network, and effectively it is you sew any garment between, it's a date in February, I think toward the end of February, early March. You tag them, any garment made, designed by a Black designer. And so this particular garment would actually qualify because the designer is Nikki, and Nikki Brooks is a Black woman. So, but there's also the Black History Month, the Black History Month pattern designers. Again, I'm just trying to remember off the top of my head, and I may get it wrong, but hop on over to Instagram. Feel free to drop me a comment and I'll let you know when I'm off live. But there are a couple competitions. So if you are sewing any garment made by a Black designer, consider entering some of those competitions. And I do believe they're random drawings, which I love. When we get into the competitions where they're judging me on a whole bunch of stuff, sometimes that I'm like, I don't want to be judged. This is just my hobby. I love it. So I shy away from sometimes the ones that are judged. I do it now and then, but sometimes I shy away from it. All right, guys, the sleeve is sleeving. It now wants me to press the seam away from the sleeve. So that means that it's going to be pressed toward the garment. Press the sleeve up toward the garment. I have a lot of layers here around the collar, the shoulder, because of the yoke and everything. So I am gonna go ahead and cut those seams down a little bit. I'm also going to serge that because I want it nice and clean on the inside. But before I do that, I'm going to reduce the layers in the seam. And I want to make sure, because I'm going to be top stitching, so I want to make sure that the seam that I'm layering is the one that is closest to the garment, and you're not going to see that it's shorter. You don't have to do this, but it really makes a difference in, to me, the way that the garment lays. So I like to take the little extra time to do that. And then go all the way around. These duck bill scissors really do help me get in there and ensures that I don't cut my main fabric. Okay, I did that. I am now going to turn it onto the right side. So right side facing up. Oh, I said I was going to serge it, but because I could serge that, but because I've already trimmed the seam, serging may or may not really make a difference. But I'm going to go ahead and serge because at least it's nice and clean. So to be noisy for just a minute as I serge this. Good morning, Bernina. Taking my time, working with a lot of fabric here. When you're serging a seam, there is a way that you can use like a knitting needle and kind of tuck the serge thread, the tails in. I'm not going to worry about doing that because this seam is going to be sewn over again, so my serged edges will get locked in. Hey, Terrence, how are you? I'm making great progress, day 2, on working on Nikki's pattern, view A, and I'm making mine into a jacket, and I'm using this really beautiful fabric. All right, so I'm going to top stitch that, and the top stitch happens on the bodice piece. And with a top stitch, you can increase the length of your stitch. Top stitching also gives you an opportunity, if you wanted to use like a contrasting stitch, that gives you a this is a great opportunity to do that. I'm not going with a contrasting stitch. I think the fabric really speaks for itself, doesn't really need anything more than that. Going over some of the bulky parts, so I'm going to slow down so that my machine feels comfortable going over it. An example of how top stitching can help to kind of give your garment that little extra oomph is if you check out the jean jacket upcycle that I did. I did a lot of top stitching and with a brownish kind of heavier thread. And with that heavier thread, it really gave it, I think, some extra dimensions. I really love the way that it came out. And while I'm talking about top stitching thread, now this isn't top stitching thread, this is regular Gudemann's thread. But if you're using a true top stitching thread or a denim thread, the only tip that I would leave with you is don't backstitch. Generally, if you backstitch, it might work 1 out of 3 times, but your machine can easily get jammed up. So the top stitching is done, and one shoulder looks really good. I'm going to go ahead and do the lay flat method on the other shoulder at this point. Remember, you want to lay your garment face up. Grab your shoulder piece, which I seem to always lose. There it is. Does anyone else lose their fabric? I tell you, I lose it all the time. All right, using my clips. And start on the other end of this sleeve where it meets the front of the bodice. And remember to make sure that you're looking at your notches. A single notch means it's the front of your garment, and a double notch is going to mean that it's the back part of your sleeve. Use lots of clips around the curve part of the sleeve. And you know, based on what I did the first time around, that sometimes I have to come back through and unpin or clip and go back over it to make sure that it is completely lined up. So I'm going to take my time doing that. And this one's a little bit off as well. No reason to fret. I just take my time and make sure that I'm getting into those curves nicely. And it usually works out. So it's just a tiny little bit of a gap. I just go back through, line her up nicely. It happens sometimes. There it is. And we're golden. Okay. Let me put some. Thank you guys so much for rocking with me. I so appreciate it. All right, we're gonna start on one end. Remember, you're gonna start stitching. You want a backspace here. This, remember your seam allowance, 5/8. And remember, this is a regular stitch length here. Let me move that out the way so you can see more of what is happening here. Make sure that the raw edges are all lined up. Take time to make adjustments because you're working with a lot of fabric here. When you're going over bulkier parts, it's okay to slow down, and it gives the motor on your machine kind of an opportunity to kind of make its way through all of that bulk. She's looking good. Y'all, we've gotten all the hard parts of this done. And let's see, time-wise, I said I was going to come on for about 2 hours and try to finish as much as possible. And that's my plan. Let's see where we are at 12 when we hit right around 2 hours. Okay. Before serging this, I am going to use my duckbill scissors, and I'm going to reduce the seam a little bit, especially where the yoke touches the sleeve area, because there's several layers of fabric there, and that's a lot. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and serge it so it's nice and clean. I took the time prior to coming on and working on this garment, and I changed my serger threads to make sure that they match pretty well. I love my Bernina because it's an air threader, and it's really easy to change your serger thread. So I'll go ahead and change it out so that the threads actually match the fabric. And even if I don't use the air threader, there are ways that you can kind of tie off your threads that makes changing your serger threads really easy. So I'm not tying off the serger tails because they will be encased in another stitch. I'm going to go ahead and take this to the ironing board, and I am going to press the seam toward the garment. That's important so that I can then top stitch it. All right. I love how this handles heat decently. Making sure I get in there around those curved edges of the sleeve. Little extra heat, again, where the yoke comes into play, because there's a lot of different layers there. Give it a little bit more of a press there. Yep, because that is a lot of different. Look out on the other side, make sure it looks good. And then we are going to top stitch this sleeve, and the seam is pressed toward the actual garment, and I'm going to top stitch close to the seam on the garment side. All right, working with a lot of fabric, so you want to make sure that you lay it out and make sure that you're sewing what you want and nothing more. Okay. Taking my time as I get around curves, make sure there's no puckering. This should have been pressed a little bit more flat. All the way around. Going easy, a little bit slower. Yeah, see that little area? There are so many different pieces of fabric. So I'm going to walk it through, being kind to my machine. This area I know I'm going to need to walk through. There's a lot going on there. Take your time. Yep. We take our machines through so much with all of the different garments that we sew. Don't forget on an annual basis to take your machine into a licensed, a duly certified technician to do some cleaning. You would be surprised at the gunk that's inside these machines. And it makes a difference. And these machines are expensive, and so you want them to last for many, many years. So that little bit of care allows your machine to continue to thrive. All right, guys, we are on now instruction 31. This is a lot of different steps, right? So instruction 31, we top stitch. Now we're on 32. We're going to pin the front and the back together at the sides, pin the sleeve edges together, stitch all the way down the side, ending at the large dot at the bottom. Okay, all the way down. All right, so at this point, you want to turn the garment so that it's right sides facing. The first thing I like to do, found a little piece of thread here. I like to start with those shoulder, the underarm of the shoulder. And I want my seams to match up. So usually I use clips, but in this particular case, I am going to use a pin because I want those seams to match up. Hey, Carmen, thank you for dropping in. All right, so we're gonna stitch all the way down to the edge of the sleeve. We're making great progress, guys. The collar is on. The collar is collaring, and it looks good. We put in our sleeve, and we are now going to stitch down the underarm all the way down to the bottom of the garment. And there should be a marking on your garment. You want to stop stitching there. So I'm going to put a pin there so I remember to do that. This garment has a curved hem, so let's see how that comes together. All right, remember your seam allowance, 5/8, and using your back stitch here, using your seam allowance, making sure you're keeping your seam allowance, stitch under the arm. That pin at the underarm is really important for me because I really want to make sure that those seams line up. Will you see them? No, but I want to make sure that they line up. It's all about what I want. That's the beauty of sewing, guys. You make it what you want, what speaks to you and what is important to you. Okay. Getting those extra little pieces to the inside of the garment. Less for me to have to clip on the outside. When you get to that notch at the end of your garment, you want to back stitch there and tie it off. You know what I probably should have done before I did this was I probably should have serged these edges because the seam is going to be you know, that hem. Oh, let me go ahead and do that real quick. What I'm going to do is serge this part together, and then I'm going to open it up on the bottom. And I'm going to make sure that I go ahead and serge the other side before I stitch it. Now down at this end, and I really wish that I had done this because I did not want this to look like this on the inside. I would have serged this separately. But your girl forgot about the curved hem. But it's going to be all right, y'all. It's going to be all right. So I'm going to go ahead and serge all the way around that curved hem while I'm at it. I like to do a lot of my serging before I come on, but I forgot about these little bits and pieces. But I'm there now. Gonna get the other piece serged as well. Working with fabrics like this is a little bit of a workout too. It's a lot of fabric you're working with. So I'm continuing to serge the edges of the bottom of the garment. Cleaning it up. And on the other side, I am going to move that. Serge all the way down. I forgot to do this on the other side. I have one more long seam to serge, and then we're back to sewing. Let me find it. Okay. Did I just... There's the row. All right. Cleaning it up. Making her beautiful on the inside. That was one of my goals this year, was for my garments to look as great on the inside as they do on the outside. All right, let me get this under there. Takes a little extra, but it's worth it. Did I not do that side? I did do that side. What am I doing? All right, I know I missed the side. What side am I missing? Oh, there it is. I'm like, I know I didn't do all of it. Here it is. This is the last seam I need to do. Okay, now we're back in business. That was our intermission. So we are going to now pin that side seam from the shoulder, from the wrist all the way down. I like to start with the underseam and lining those seams up really neatly, pinning them, and then I will begin to actually sew the sleeves together. 5/8 seam allowance. And you'll notice that I don't always use pins or clips. This fabric is not slippery. It's a beauty to sew with. So sometimes I don't always use pins or clips. I'm able to just hold it together and she's good to go. All right, let me adjust the end part. Remember, when you get down to the bottom, looking for that notch, and you want to back stitch at the notch. Keep going. There's my little, if you can see that, the little notch. I'm going to stop there and back stitch. Okay. Those are the side seams now. We are at the cuff. So the cuff is a dual kind of layered cuff. It's really cute. I really like that on Know Me Pattern 2052. I really love how Nikki added that. Because my fabric is fairly thick, I am going to omit one of the cuffs. I did a little playing around with it, and I felt like the double cuff was just too, it was weighted too heavily for what I'm going for a transitional coat from winter to spring. So I'm only going to go with one of the two cuffs. I'm going to go with the larger of the two, which is cuff A. I'm not going to throw away this little remnant though, because I have a little bit more of this fabric, and this remnant will work out really nicely with a bag that I'm gonna make. All right, I see some little gadgets off to the side. Yeah, making really good progress. Hi, Angela. Thank you so much for dropping in. All right, so make sure that you have transferred your notches over to your pattern piece. There were a lot of pattern pieces here. We're now on pattern piece 10, which is, in this particular case, the last pattern piece, because I am not doing the double cuff. I am not going to use the instructions provided in the instructions at this point, because I'm doing my own thing. I'm going to go with a single cuff, and I'm going to install it the way that I normally do. But before I do that, as always, you want to make sure that you press your seams. But before, I'm stepping on my iron cord. Before pressing the seams, I like to just kind of go over the seam with the iron, and it kind of helps the thread to kind of really join with your fabric. Give it a little bit of steam. I'm going to do that on the other one. Y'all, this looks so good. I wish that I had made it reversible, because I love the inside as much as I love the outside. And it could have been reversible. I would have had to do like biased binding or something. All right, so again, before I move on, I want to press the underside of that sleeve, and for nice crisp seam. So this is a new addition to my sewing room. It is called a sleeve board. In my stories on Instagram, I shared it. It comes in two pieces. It's easy assembly with these little screws. One side of the sleeve board is more narrow than the other side, and I love it. I keep it handy. And what I basically do with it, let me turn it around to my garment. I basically just slide, I'm using the narrow side today. I slide my sleeve on it. Y'all, I love this. I'm so geeky. I slide my sleeve on it and I give it a press. Y'all, that is so cool. I love that. And it's not intended for regular seams, but while I have it here, I'm going to press that side seam. Go ahead, turn the other one out. Let me press the underside of that cuff, nice and flat. I've been wanting this for a while. I had my eye on it. I had some other little stuffed little things that are supposed to help with the sleeve. I find this to be way better. And my seam, y'all, looks so good. I'm gonna hit that side seam real quick. And then I'm gonna be back and we're gonna put the cuff on. I am one of those people that I do press along the way. Let me make sure my seams are flat and in the right direction before I hit it. Oh, it looks so good. It looks so good. It's coming along so nicely. I love the matchy-matchy. All right, let me get this stuff off my floor so I don't step on it. All right. We are at the cuff. Get rid of some of these serger threads. Because you know, sometimes if you don't cut your thread, it shows up on the exterior of your fabric. You can still cut it off, but I like to go ahead and clean it up if I see it. Okay. So again, I'm doing this the way that I want to. What I did was I took each sleeve and I pressed under a small seam allowance. This is about maybe a quarter, maybe a half of an inch on one end because I'm going to stitch in the ditch. So to get started, right sides facing, I want to do the, nope, I'm gonna do the interface side. Right sides facing, yeah, right sides facing. Let me look, does her right sides facing, I'm going to clip it. I like to go around to the other side and clip it there too. I'm giving myself a scant bit of seam allowance on the outside of that area. And I'll show you why in a minute. I'm going to go ahead and pin this all the way around, or clip it all the way around, I should say. Actually, do I want to do that without? Give me a moment just to think about this, because after I do that, I'm going to tuck it under and stitch in the ditch. Should I at least start with the sides? Yes. Okay. I'm going to start by doing that little seam allowance and enclosing the sides, and then I can make sure I have a nice pointed edge. All right, so what I'm going to do is just stitch along the side of the cuff, back stitching. So I'm doing the short end of the cuff, and that will then allow me to go ahead and kind of turn it out and clean up the cuff. I'm going to do that on the other side. And I'm lining it up in such a way so that that's not what I should be doing. So that's the other thing, is when you go off and do your own thing, sometimes you have to use the seam ripper because you're like in your head, you're constructing it on how you want it to come together. And then you do something that you realize that is not what I was imagining. And if you're lucky, it happens before you end up going too far. Because I just remembered that I needed to kind of line this up a little bit differently. Okay. And to make sure that I was taking into consideration the seam allowance. Remember I told you guys I really love that on the end of some of these little seam rippers, they have this little like eraser thing that helps to pick up thread. So I need to make sure that when I sew this, that the seam is actually included. I'm really giving this a lot of thought on what I'm doing here. So I think this is what I want. Forgive me for mumbling as I'm thinking out on the spot my construction on how this is going to all come together. Because it's going to go after I flip it out. I'm going to sew this piece right sides facing. I'll bring you through with my creative work as soon as I figure it out. Okay, I'm good. All right, so you want to sew the short ends and make sure that you leave a little bit of the seam allowance that's going to be on the outside. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So this is the part of the cuff that I'm going to actually sew to the sleeve. So there will be a 5/8 seam allowance. So I went on and just pressed that on the other side because this is the side that will have the stitch in the ditch. So if you're following my way of doing this, you want to press a 5/8 quarter of an inch toward the wrong side. You're going to fold your sleeve cuff in half, and you want to make sure that you leave a little bit of a seam allowance here. And you're going to sew from here all the way down on both sides of the short end of the cuff. I'm going to show you what that looks like. Make sure the back stitch all the way down. Repeat that on the other side, making sure that you leave that seam allowance because you're going to need that when you attach your cuff to your shirt. Before turning your sleeve cuff out, take some scissors and you want to get in there very close to that seam, that stitched area, and that's going to allow you to have a nice clean point there. I'm going to get rid of some of the seam allowance here. Do that on the other side as well. Reduce the seam allowance a little bit. Especially important because I'm using a heavier fabric. I'm going to turn my cuffs to the right side using my point turner. Remember, you can find this in my Amazon store. Inexpensive little gadget. You have the point, then you also have the rounded edge. And I'm just going to use the point gently in that area of the cuff. So it gives it that nice, that looks really nice, that nice 90-degree angle that you want. Do that to the other side. I am going to give this a little bit of a press. Let me do that. Move my sleeve forward. Give it a little bit of a press. And then moving on to the actual sleeve, I am going to, with that part of, remember, we left one edge with a little bit of seam allowance raw. This raw edge, you want to attach right sides facing to the raw edge of your shirt. And you're going to line those pieces up there. This is probably a good place for an actual pin versus a clip, because you want to be as exact as possible. I'm trying to keep some of the little pieces of thread out of the way. Going to do the exact same thing, lining those up. Use a pin. Pins for me really help to make sure that it is spot on. Let me get in there. A lot of fabric. Okay. And then at this point, you can continue to pin around that cuff, pin, or you can use clips. I'm going to use clips because a whole bunch of pins just mean I'm going to hurt myself. So, and that lined up perfectly. So before I take it to the machine on this first cuff, I'm going to show you what I've done again. So we constructed the cuff, sewing the short ends. We turned it out. We used the point turner here to make a nice crisp corner of your cuff. And then aligning the raw edges of the cuff and the sleeve, I'm now going to take it to the machine, making sure that I keep this folded edge out of the way. If you have an arm that you can remove, this is probably a good time to remove the arm. I'm going to start on one side. This is a little tricky. I really try to open that piece up so I can get there because I want to get right into that seam. I'm going to actually drop my needle in it before I start sewing, so I know that I've hit it. And you really want to make sure that you do not use this, catch this folded edge in. Maintaining your 5/8 seam allowance. Removing your clips as you go along. I love when a dream comes together. I would like to use music when I go live on YouTube. I'm new to YouTube, and I'm afraid that if I use music that may not be something that, you know, has any copyrights or something. And I do have non-copyrighted music, but I didn't want to risk taking the chance that for whatever reason it didn't fly and my video got pulled down. I wanted to make sure that this would be available. So all you get is me, no music. Catch me on TikTok, and then I'll use music for that. So coming to the end, taking my time to make sure I'm hitting the seam allowance, back stitching. It's looking good, guys. So I've done that, and you can, here's a little bit of a preview of what it looks like. And it even lined up a little bit. Not perfect, but it lined up some. And so there's the cuff. I am now going to take it over to the ironing board, to the iron. I'm going to take some of this, reduce the seam a little bit, because it's a lot of fabric. Again, you don't always have to do that, but I'm working with a lot of thick fabric here. So I'm going to reduce the seam allowance using my duckbill scissors. You guys have seen how many times I've used this, right? It's definitely something I recommend. Okay, so I reduced the seam. Let me give it a little bit of a press. I'm going to turn it to the inside to be able to really give it a good press. And you want to press that seam allowance toward the sleeve. Let me go ahead and use my sleeve board. I think that that will be helpful. So I'm going to press that seam allowance toward the shirt, the cuff, all the way around. Really getting it good in those little corners there. Okay. We're almost done with the cuffs. I am then going to turn that seam allowance to the inside of the garment, but on the outside, I am going to use pins so that I can stitch in the ditch. So I want that inner folded edge to just slightly be outside of my ditch. And for folks that are not that are new to sewing, that may not know what the ditch is, it really means that seam line there. That's considered the ditch. Hey, Cynthia. I'm back again, girl, working on part 2, and we've made really great progress. I'm really happy with my fabric choice. So put a number of pins there. Make sure that you can feel that folded edge so that when you do stitch in the ditch, that indeed you are catching in that folded edge. And here you want to make sure that you get rid of any extra pieces of thread. Get it in there good. And on the outside, pin her down. All right, so I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and I'm going to simply stitch in the ditch, making sure that I'm lining it up, and I'm going to back stitch. This is a lot of fabric, so I'm going to go a little bit slower to allow my sewing machine, there it is, to be able to adjust. And as you're doing this, you want to kind of just feel the fabric to make sure that that folded edge on the inside is still there. I am almost done. I am very, very close. Very close. I thought I might need a third day, but I might actually just go ahead and press through because I have I do have a couple things to do. I have the cuff to finish on the other side. I have the hem still. And I wanted to show you guys how I put on my buttons using my sewing machine. So tell me what you think. Should I just press on? It might end up being another hour. Or should I try to schedule another day? What do you think I should do? Press on and do those little pieces. All right, I'm almost coming to the end of this one. All right, where's my, I'm not gonna move the pin here. I usually try to move my pins, but I want this one to be as exact, so I'm taking my time. I'm gonna back stitch here. All right, there's collar one, cuff one. All right, clean up my extra little pieces. So that's the inside of the sleeve, and you can even tell on the inside of the sleeve how nice that looks. And here's the outside of the sleeve. No stitches. Looks really, really good. Okay, let me go ahead. So you're saying press on. I might just do that. All right, let me do as I did on the other side, and I'm going to get close in there and reduce the seam. It's a lot of fabric here, so I want to reduce the seam as much as possible. And when I reduce the seam, I don't clip this part because this part actually is helpful as I push it into the other side. Hey, Renee. Hi. Thank you for dropping in. I've made such good progress. I'm working on the cuff. All right, we're going to turn this out. Get my point turner. And I want to go into that corner of the cuff to get that nice, sharp 90-degree. And that looks really good. I want to do the same on the other side. I'm going to take this to the ironing board and do a really quick little press. I have never ironed so much in my life. And the thing about it is I don't even mind. I used to hate ironing. All right, let me get rid of those extra scraps. And now we're off to the other cuff. Before moving on, I'm going to get rid of some extra little threads. Sounds good. All right, she's looking good. She's looking good. All right. I'm going to go ahead and pin, just like we did on the first one. You want to pin right sides facing the raw edges together. And this is where I do indeed like to use an actual pin to kind of hold it in place. You want to keep that folded edge out of the way because you're not going to be sewing that piece at all. You get that piece when you do your stitch in the ditch. But for now, you just want it out of your way. And then I'm going to use clips around the rest of, let me make sure that the seam is laying the way it should. I'm going to use clips around the rest of the sleeve. Less chance of me hurting myself with those sharp pins. And it lines up perfectly. Okay. Take this to the sewing machine as we did on the other side. Which side do I want to start on? I'm going to start here. Okay. I want to actually drop the needle where I want it to start. So it's right at the seam and holding that other part of the cuff out of the way. You do not want to catch that in. Take your time. It's a lot of fabric here. You want to back stitch. I got a little crazy on the back stitching. Come on, stop back stitching. All right. Using the regular seam allowance, which is 5/8. I have to figure out what I want to work on after this. I have a bag that I'm making a backpack, my first backpack ever. And surprisingly, as I opened the pattern isn't like pattern pieces. It is measurements. So I have to measure out all of the different pattern pieces and then label them. So I wasn't exactly intending to have to do that, but I want to do it, and then I keep putting it off because I'm like, I don't want to do that. But I might work on that after I finish this. Let me back stitch here. I'm going to take it over and give it a press. Same as I did on the other one. But before doing that, I want to get rid of some of this extra material. So I'm going to, as they say, layer the seam. And I'm layering the seam that will actually be covered. So it's going to be the seam closest to the cuff. The other seam will be pressed in toward the cuff and cover this one. Okay, so I did that. Let's take it over and give it a little bit of a press. Making sure that the seam is pressed up toward the cuff. Sticking those little ends in there. Pressing does actually help a lot. And I'm just going to hit it this time. And then I'm going to come over. And at this point, we are going to stitch in the ditch on the outside. So I'm going to make sure that I'm pinning that down. And as I pin it down, I want to make sure that I can feel that folded edge under the, just slightly beyond the ditch, so that I know when I'm stitching in the ditch that I'm going to be able to catch it. This thread really is a good match that even if you kind of come out of the ditch a little bit and end up stitching on the cuff or on the actual sleeve, it does not stand out. It really blends in neatly. You know, fabric choice is important. Thread choice is important. Thread choice is important. You know, making sure you have the right thread for your fabric. And that includes the right thread, the density of the thread, and those sorts of things. All right. Let's stitch in the ditch. Drop my needle so that I know that I'm getting that edge. Go forward a little bit, but then I'm going to back stitch. Good. Take the pins out along the way. This is a piece of the sewing project that pins do make a difference. It really makes a difference. So what I'm feeling is making sure that that folded edge is indeed under the ditch and that I'm catching it in. If I don't catch it, it's not the end of the world. I can just add an extra stitch or two. Fortunately, this entire project, whenever I've had to stitch the ditch, it's come out really nicely without me having to go back. I love when it just comes together like that. Almost. We're almost there. Making sure the fabric is laid out. And I'm going to actually take out some of these pins because I'm feeling a little bit of bulkiness and I want to pull the sleeve. There we go. And make sure that it lays properly. I'm happy with that. Just trusting the process. All right. There's a little area that I did not catch the ditch, so I'm going to go back over. Other than, oh, I didn't catch the ditch there either. I shouldn't have said how. Y'all, I talked that up. I was like, I have stitched the ditch the whole time. And then as soon as I said that, my project was like, here you go. Here's one for you. So if I don't catch it the first time, I just go back and catch it in. The thread really melds in so nicely. Oops, presser foot came off. It gels with this fabric so nicely. My presser foot came off. I pushed it by mistake. It gels with the fabric so nicely that it's all good. All right, so it's a lot of fabric. Let's make sure I'm in it. Take my time. Take my time. So just when I said the stitching in the ditch worked out fine, and then the universe said, not so fast, Byrd. Okay. See how nicely that comes out? Even with me having to go over it again. Super clean. Super clean. I like it. Okay. So, woo, guys. All right. So we have put on the cuff. We're at the finishing part, which is the hem. Hemming is really not something I think that you guys need a whole lot of assistance with. So what they have me doing on the hemming is, of course, I didn't do it the way they told me to do it. So I would have to undo my stitches because I was supposed to do it a different way. And I might do it because I like the clean way. So I might actually go ahead and just take these few stitches out and do it that way. I tell you, sometimes I just get so happy with sewing that I do not follow the instructions at all. But when I see something along the way that I'm like, no, that makes a big difference in the final finish. If I have to take something out, I'll take it out. So I'm going to go ahead and although I say I'm going to take it out, but this thread matches so nicely, guys, that I'm not entirely sure that I'm going to take it out. Because it matches so nicely that trying to seam rip it, I may actually end up ruining it. So I'm not going to do it. I am simply going to fold it up, and what we need to do is to ease in the fullness around the curves, machine based from the raw edges. Okay. Because you have a curved hem here, so I just ignored what I'm going to do here. I'm just going to simply fold that up. I'm not going to take that out because the basting, those stitches look so good in there. I don't want to take it out. And I think it will be perfectly fine. Because this is a curved hem, what they have me doing is basically doing gathering stitches around the curved part of the hem, which will allow me to kind of pull in the fullness of the hem. Which will help as I'm hemming the curved edge. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And so when I say gathering, you want to turn your stitch to the longest length. So from what would normally be like a stitch of 2.5, you want to go to a 5 stitch length, and which is basically a basting stitch. And you want to go all the way around the curve. Don't tie it off. Y'all, I just lost on, how do you like that? So y'all are like, what happened, Byrd? So how do you like that? I just lost on bobbin chicken. So perfect. Ran out of bobbin thread. I came prepared. I have another bobbin ready. This little case I actually got from Amazon as well. It's in my Amazon store. And I just, some days if I'm sewing something, I'll do 2 of a particular color. And it really helps me to be ready. So I don't have to slow down what I'm doing because I ran out of bobbin thread. It happens. Sometimes I have the same thing with my spool, but it looks like I'm perfectly fine. And I was able to get in the basting stitch there, so I don't have to worry about that. Let's do that on the curves of the other part of the jacket. Remember, basting stitch and leave your tails of your thread long so that you can gather them while you are sewing. So you want to keep those tails long. I usually keep a couple inches on mine. Let's do that on the other 2 curves of your jacket. And you want to make sure that you're doing that basting stitch on the, I know, right? You want to do that basting stitch on the exterior of your fabric, because then when you're having to do the easing of the fabric, you want to do that from the inside, and you want to use your bobbin thread. So that's why you want to do the basting stitch on the outside. And remember, leave those threads long. And I have one more little curve of the jacket that I need to do all the way around. Oh, now my thread. All right. So sometimes when I need to change the bobbin or something, the thread will become unthreaded and I have to just thread it back through the needle. And when you thread your needle, you want to make sure that it is at the highest part. So I usually drop my needle and then lift it. Oops, that didn't work. Let me. There it is. All right, now let's do that again. To baste around that last final curve. Let me make sure it is working. And remember, you want to pull it out. Keep your thread tails long. At this point, the pattern has us taking it to the sewing machine. So the pattern actually calls for you to press under the hem and then press it under again. I'm not going to do that because I serged my edges. I think that's clean enough for me on the inside of my jacket. I am not going to fold and fold again, but you can. Hey, Robin. Thank you, baby. Now let me see what is the seam allowance on the hem, or the hem allowance. So the turn the facings to the inside, make 5/8" narrow hem at side openings, taper, pivot across seam allowance, 1/4 of an inch above the large dot. Oh, okay, okay. So basically flatten that piece out. Got it. So it's only a 5/8 seam allowance on the hem. No, it's a little bit, yeah, it's a 5/8. So hopefully you guys can see me. I am going to go over to my ironing board. We are coming close to the end here, guys. And I'm going to just press under the hem. First, I'm going to press my seam allowances open on the side seams. That part is important. Give it a little bit of steam. One side of the inside looks better than the other. All right, I'm eyeballing it about 5/8 all the way around. I don't know about you guys, but after sewing for a while, I kind of honestly can truly kind of eyeball pretty much a seam allowance. So this is where you can pull the threads to pull in some of the fullness there. I don't really find I needed that much, but they're there. So you can just pull on those gathering threads to pull in the fullness a little bit. I'm doing that on each corner, evening it out. You don't have to do a whole lot of it, and it immediately kind of creates that little fold for you. I'm going to go all the way around. After I do the hem, the only last part that I have to do, and then we are all done, is I'm going to put on at least one of the buttons so you guys can see my process for doing that. Gone are the days that I am sewing on my buttons by hand. I am so glad about that. It's funny, I like sewing, but I don't like sewing by hand. So that little, those gathering stitches on the curved hem really does help a little bit. Help a lot of it. It helps a lot of it. So when you're doing curved hems on other garments, just remember that little tip. Something, you know, that you can use. Okay. And you don't need much. You really don't need much. Okay, using my little eyeballing gifted skills. A little bit of a press. I do want the front of my lapels, my placket, to be completely even. So one of the tricks that I will do is to hold the placket together all the way down and make sure that, now it should line up, right? Because these were identically cut. But I always do this just to make sure. And I'm glad that I did, because this one is a little bit off. So those are little tiny things that I do at the end of the journey here. And I'm going to do that again to make sure I'm happy with that. Making sure those are all lined up. I also see that my collar stand is off too. You might not notice it, but I notice it. It's off by 1/4 of an inch. Yep. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Let me see if it's noticeable. Nope. Like I said, don't let perfect get in the way of pretty damn good. All right, so all that I need to do at this point is hem, buttons, and all of that stuff. So we are so close. Drop the needle, and I'm going to just go ahead and do my hem. You can backstitch here if you want. and then go all the way around. And when I'm sewing a hem, I just kind of keep my finger on my hem and make sure that I can feel the very edge, and to make sure I'm staying pretty much the same distance from the folded edge, but making sure that I am encasing that raw edge on the inside. And my edge isn't raw because I have, I serged it. All right. Cleaning up any extra little threads along the way. Oops, I can see my stitching. And I'm going to take that out because I can see the basting stitch here. We don't want to see that. We got to get it out of the way. Can you guys believe that my son is a professional musician and your girl cannot even carry a tune? It's crazy. He definitely was born. He did not get any of that talent from me. I always wish that I could sing. Like I always wish I had that kind of voice, but I do not. I have the cringy voice. I remember when he was a kid and I would sing to him, like sitting on the porch or something and like singing a lullaby. And literally, he's like 18 months and he would do this. I was like, oh my God, I must sound horrible. So when you get to that little curved end, you just want to pivot, go to the other side, and then continue to hem around the other curved edge of the garment. And let me make sure that you guys can see that. Uh-oh, something got stuck. Does your machine do this ever? And what I mean by that is if my machine gets jammed up, what happens is, and oops, first off, I'm still on a basting stitch. Oh, that sucks, man. I'm on a basting stitch. This needs to be a regular stitch. But if my machine gets a little bit jammed up, what it will do is stop. You know, the machine will say it needs to rest for a moment, and it will stop. And that is a really magical feature because it keeps you from doing any damage to your machine. What you guys see me doing right now is removing that basting stitch. I did not mean to put a basting stitch in on the hem, and I wouldn't normally take out a basting stitch, but the basting stitch is visible here because the stitch length is so long. And to me, it takes away, I can see it, I don't like that, so I'm just taking my time to go ahead and take it out. So even though you hear me say often that I don't let perfect get in the way of pretty darn good, there are some things like this that I won't sleep on. I'm going to take the time to go ahead and go back and make the correction. Those 60 seconds, 2 minutes to make the correction for me is important. I would be looking down at this jacket when I'm out saying to myself, girl, you know you should have taken those basting stitches out. So let's just do it. So it's a long beat of it, but it's worth doing it. I so appreciate you guys rocking with me. With you being here, it really helps. I'm trying to do more in the way of sewing content here that I hope will be helpful for and to other people. If there is particular sewing content that you would like for me to publish, let me know. You know, I'd like to want to provide things that are going to be of use to you. Things I want to do too, but things that are of use. If you haven't, if you would please hit the subscribe button. Would also love if you wouldn't mind sharing the YouTube channel on your social media sites. You just click share and copy the link. And then on any of your social media, whether it's Threads, TikTok, Facebook, and just share it with other people. It allows me to continue to provide content to other people. And this is all free content. So as other people subscribe, it's all completely free. All right. We're almost there unpicking. And like I said, it's some of these kinds of things that matters to me, and I will go back and unpick something. And I'm glad that my machine I'm not glad it got jammed up, but I'm glad it needed to rest, because that was a good opportunity for me to say, reset, Byrd. Let's get these basting stitches out of there. And I'm going to try to do better about going live on YouTube. I'm definitely going to do some taped sew-alongs and different things like that. But I'm going to try to go live because I love interacting with you all. All right, so let me figure out what went wrong here. So I'm going to just unthread and do it again to be on the safe side. Pull the bobbin out, make sure that the bobbin is in there properly. So if your machine gets jammed, I like to take a moment to double check to make sure that my thread and the bobbin are correctly inserted properly. Whoops. Make sure those things are in properly. Something is getting stuck here. Let me do that again. If I continue to have problems, then what I do is I pull out my tool and I open up the throat of the machine and go in. And usually there's some pieces of thread that got stuck in there. And it may not seem like much, but even one piece of thread stuck in your machine can cause you to have problems. So I will do that little cleaning out. All right, before, I'm hoping that I won't have to, but I have it threaded again. I've checked the bobbin, get rid of these basting stitches. And I think I'm ready to go at it again. Yeah, I was like, why are those stitches so visible? Because it was a basting stitch, Byrd. That's why. All right. Got a couple little pieces, and while I'm there, I see a couple little threads hanging off, so I'm going to take the time to clean that up. All right, let's see if we are back in business now. All right, she sounds pretty good. All right, guys. I love the way it's coming together. Taking my time around the curved hem, making sure that I'm sticking to the seam allowance and staying the same distance away from the folded edge. Whoops, needed to be down. Just for some uniformity. Making sure that you pivot. Take care of those little gnarly threads along the way that you no longer need. I don't need those basting stitches around the curves anymore. All the way down and around. Yes, he had a good ear early on, Cynthia. Isn't that funny? Some people would be like, what is this child doing? But I was like, whatever. And I'm not going to say that I know my voice is crazy, right? Not the best. Because sometimes when I'm singing, it sounds good to me. And then the people that are around me are like, all right, getting rid of the basting stitches. Don't really need them in there. So where I around the curved edge, just for a cleaner look. But I'm around people who they will tell me, my kids in a heartbeat will tell me that, Mom, no, that ain't it. That ain't it. Thank God, you know, because God blessed me with other skills. All right. Checking to make sure it's stitching properly. Go down to where you have that little opening in the curved hem. Lift your presser foot, pivot, sew across it flat. Leave your your needle in, turn it, pivot, and bring her home. I'm gonna get rid of that basting stitch. You won't see it, but we don't need it, so I'm getting rid of it. Yep, all the way around. We have a jacket, y'all. We have, woo, y'all, I am covered in threads. We have a shacket. The shacket is effectively done. What is left, I have so many loose threads because of the basting stitches that I took out. I will clean them all up. The shacket is done. I love the little label that I put in that says be kind. I may go back in and put in my personal label, Yoga Byrd Sews. I love the pattern matching and the little pocket on the side. There she is, guys. I'm gonna press the collar down, and there she is. The matching came out pretty nicely, even on the sides. It's not 100% perfect, but it's pretty darn good. The sleeves are hitting the way that they should hit. This feels really nicely. It is a lot of fabric because of the type of fabric that I use. I'm gonna go in, I have buttonholes, but I'm gonna go in, cut the buttonholes open and put my buttons on. I'm going with black buttons. I added, can't feel my pockets. I added these little pockets here. They blend in so nicely, but everything needs pockets. Everything needs pockets. So I put those pockets in. They're just basically patch pockets on the outside, but they're done really neatly that they don't stand out. I'm going to put, there's supposed to be 2 buttons on the end here. I may only do 1 on each end. And then I'm going to go in. I'm going to do a buttonhole here, buttons go there, and then buttons all the way down. So this is Know Me pattern 2052. It is Nikki Brooks. I think it's her fall or winter pattern. I did view A, which is generally supposed to be done with a cotton or linen blend. So it really is made to for a lighter weight shirt. I wanted something that I could transition from winter to fall, winter to spring, and this is it. So I can wear it as a shirt right now if I want, with anything I want underneath. My intent for this is that it will be like a jacket. So I call it a shacket, and I'm gonna layer it with something underneath. I have these leather pants that I made that I think will be so dope with this. So this is cute, guys. I love it. I made myself a Burberry jacket. Um, So that is my jacket. The one thing that I wanted to share with you guys about buttons and buttonholes. Thank you, Terrence. One of the things that I wanted to share with you guys about buttons and buttonholes. So yesterday I made these early on during part one. So if you didn't get a chance to watch part one, go to my channel, watch part one. We go through the construction of the placket, the way that I like to pull it together in a very clean way. I show you how I do my buttons. After putting the buttons on, I put a little bead of what is called fray check just along the outer edge, not the outer edge, on the inside of the buttonhole, and I let it dry overnight, which then kind of creates some structure here. And that structure, when I cut this buttonhole open, it won't fray. And that's the whole point of it. That also is in my Amazon store. Super cheap, highly recommended. Fray, Fray, check. It isn't necessarily coming up clear here. And then this is what I use to cut open my buttonhole. It is a Clover buttonhole cutter. Also in my Amazon store. I'm actually going to go to my sewing table because you can cut on your sewing table. And I want to cut on my sewing machine table. Let me move this out the way. So what you can do here is the placket where you have your buttonholes is, I use my buttonhole, let me move this further. I use my buttonhole cutter and I just simply apply pressure. Oops, it's slipping a little bit. This is a lot of fabric. I apply a little bit of pressure in there to open up that buttonhole. Once you open up the buttonhole, if you want, you can then use your scissors to be a little bit exact here. It's your call on what you do. And I want to make sure that it's large enough that the button of choice, will actually fit in. And so I just kind of slip it in and it fits in neatly and nicely. And so I don't need to cut any more into that. So that's what I do. I'm going to do one more. Getting all the way in. This is a very sharp tool, so just be very careful with it. I still need to do buttonholes on my pocket and also on my chest pocket. Okay, so that's nice and neat. All right, so I'm going to show you guys one more thing. It might be more than one thing, but at least one more thing. If I can find my, using a heat erasable pen. I line up my plackets. I line up the placket. I actually like to pin it in place. And after I pin it in place where the buttonhole has been cut open, I use my dry erasable pen. I stick it through the buttonhole right where the center of the buttonhole is. So right in the center of that buttonhole. And I just wiggle it around a little bit. And do that for the next button as well. Making sure that the fabric did not slip. Let me put another pin in there. So this is how I make sure that my buttons are aligned properly. I don't use necessarily the guide. And put another little mark in the next spot. Okay. So if you can see, I put a little mark where the buttonholes are. I like to put a pin next to it because sometimes it's hard to see it when you're starting to sew on your button. And I'm just going to show you how I sew on a button, and I hope it works out okay. Remember, I'm new at this, but this is how I do it. I've done it a few times. So the first thing that you need to do is there are things called feed dogs in here. Oh, let me move you. There are feed dogs here that helps your fabric to move through. When you're sewing on a button, you have to actually, for the Pfaff, it's a button here, and I press it far to the right, and I remove the feed dogs. So they now are no longer there. I just pop off my sewing machine, my presser foot. This is called a jumper. And what a jumper does in garment and button sewing is when you sew on a button, let me tell you what happens if you sew on a button without a jumper. If you sew on a button without a jumper, your button will be flush against your fabric, that when you're trying to button up your jacket or shirt or whatever, you're struggling a little bit because it's too close to the fabric. The jumper, there are two sides. I'm going to use the more narrow side. And I actually put that between the button and the fabric. And in doing so, it creates a tiny bit of space that allows me to be able to freely button my jacket. So this button will slip all over the place. So the next thing that I do, this is too much tape. The next thing that I do, and I just figure this stuff out, what makes sense to me, is I take a tiny bit of Scotch tape. I try not to tape over where the thread will go, because then sometimes that's hard to remove. So I tape my button onto the jumper, and I'm showing this to you so you can see that the light goes through the holes. That part is really important because when you're sewing on the button, you don't want the needle to strike the jumper. So you want to make sure that the button holes are free, right? So that's why I make sure those are in the center. I then turn my stitch to button, which is number 39 on my Pfaff. Place my garment first where the button needs to be. I have it marked. I then place, I want you guys to be able to really see this. I'm going to come closer because I want you to be able to see this. And hopefully you can. Okay, so I have my button on the jumper, taped down, otherwise it's moving around. I've done it. Without it being taped down, it just takes me a few more minutes because it keeps moving. I know, it's really helpful. All right, so I'm going to make sure that I have my foot pretty much right over where I have the mark on the garment. I'm going to slide the button right over. I'm going to turn it because, guys, I have to put it in this hand because that's the way that I need to keep my right hand free. So I put that right over that red mark that I put down. Now this is the tricky part because it's thick fabric. So I need to slide this under, and I'm just kind of moving it around a little bit to make sure it's where your girl wants it. Then I sit my presser foot down. I start to push the needle down, and I do it once or twice manually, right? To make sure that it is lined up properly. I put my presser foot down. I don't know about y'all, but I put my glasses on because just in case the button is off kilter or whatever, I want to make sure that my eyes are protected. So I put on glasses, whatever glasses you got, sunglasses, you name it. And I do it again once or twice. And then I want this to be on nice and tight. So then I just press my start button on the machine. I hit my little snip, and the machine has, where'd my little snippers go? The machine has sewn on my button. There's the button. I simply slide the jumper off of the button, move the pin, and my button is installed. And that's how I install my buttons. I clean up any extra thread in the back, and it works out pretty magically, okay? And I'm gonna do one more of these. Again, you wanna make sure that those, whoops, get rid of that piece of plastic. You wanna make sure that the buttonholes are free and not under the jumper, but between, so you can see, if you can see the light, trying to get it somewhere where you can see the light. See the light coming through the buttons? That is really important. So going back to where I have placed the dot for the second button, I'm going to place my jumper there, making sure that the buttonholes are over the red dot, slide it in, lift up my presser foot, sit it down before I move away. So I can tell you now that this one is off because it's hitting something. So I need to adjust it. Oh, first off, I need to move that out of the way. I'm surprised the first one worked with that in the way. Okay, making sure that it's where it needs to be. Sit it down, go through twice, take out the pin. The pin is stuck in there. Okay, take out the pin. Let me do that again because I moved the pin. And then I hit start, hands free. Snip. And the second one is on. If I were hand sewing these buttons, I would still probably be threading the first button. And what that jumper has allowed is for the button to have enough space away from the garment that when I close the garment, there is just enough thread there so that it closes up nicely. Otherwise, you find yourself struggling to close the button. And look how clean my buttonholes are because look how clean that is. Because I did the fray check, allowed it to dry overnight. It's very clean. And then, so first two of my buttons on my Shacket are done. I'm gonna go back in, I'm gonna finish all of my buttons. I am going to put buttons here and on the rest of the garment where they're needed. But I'm repeating things I've already done, so I'm not gonna hold you guys for that. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or comments about anything that we've done in the, let's see, 3 hours we've been together. We've done a lot though in 3 hours, right? So 2 hours yesterday, 3 hours today, made a complete shacket that I can wear today with or without buttons. I can wear it out today. And remember, the 5 hours that included me spending time chatting with you guys and really taking my time to go over the things that I'm doing, especially the way that I installed the yoke, the way that I installed the collar and the cuffs, which were completely different, and the placket, completely different than the instructions in the pattern, putting on the patch pockets and the slant pockets. So it took a lot of time to do all of that. So hopefully I've given you some tips. Yes, the tape tip. And when you tape it, Cynthia, don't tape over, um, don't tape over the holes in the button. You can, but if you tape over the holes in the button, what I find is that after it's sewn on, that then I have a little harder time trying to get the tape off because the thread is holding it down, right? So I just tape the edges to hold it on just enough to keep it where it needs to be. But not really overdoing it. So that's it for us, guys. Again, this is Nomi Pattern 2052. Nikki actually joined us earlier today, and I was really happy to see her join for the first part of today's live. Remember, this is part 2. Part 1 is already up on my site. Go over, like it, love it. Drop comments. All of that supports me in what I'm doing in my sewing journey. I think that's it. Thank you. I think that's it. Thank you so much, Cynthia. I think that's it for us for today. Please subscribe. I'm always looking for little pieces of thread, right? Please subscribe and share with your friends and family. Play the videos from start to finish. All of those things are important in my journey as I'm trying to build the YouTube channel. And the more that you guys like and subscribe, eventually I'll be able to monetize my channel and I can bring you guys more content. And when the channel is monetized, it's still free. All of the content will remain free. Remember that all of the little goodies that I use today or even the iron that I use, the Oliso. Everything is in my Amazon store, and the link, all of that stuff is in my bio. I'm actually going to drop it in the comments after the video upload. So I am done for the day, guys. You guys are amazing, and I appreciate and love you all so much. And I bid you farewell, and I will see you again. Happy sewing, and thank you, guys. Oh, right, my little heart. There we go. My little beating heart for you guys. Thank you guys. Happy sewing and bye-bye for now.